2025 was quite a year, wasn't it? It was full of friction, of messiness, of recalibrations, of daunting questions about what's next, of being willing to step into an uncomfortable space of not knowing and trusting whatever spark was emerging that could lead me to the next piece of clarity. Something profoundly shifted this year, not just in the market, not just because it was the year of the snake, not even in all of these social media algorithms, but in me. I leaned into something that has sparked extraordinary clarity. So this is my story of 2025, the challenges, the breakthroughs, the highs, the lows, and the surprising discoveries that are shaping my future. You are listening to Amplify Your Success podcast, episode 471. And today I am taking you behind the scenes into one of the most interesting and profoundly transformational years I've ever experienced in business. You ready for this? Let's get started. Welcome to the Amplify Your Success podcast. Get ready to ramp up your revenue, amplify your impact, and make your mark in the world. This is the show for experts, thought leaders, and service professionals who want to shatter their limits and achieve that next level. You're going to find out from other experts and influencers how they made it. Now, let's get amplified. Hey there, inspired entrepreneurs and business leaders. It's your host, Melanie Benson, and this is my 2025 year-end wrap. This episode is something I used to do on my business blog, but since I've been active with this podcast, I haven't been blogging nearly as much, and it just felt like this is something we needed to talk about here on Amplify Your Success, mostly because I know I am not the only one that had a very profoundly challenging year. This seems to be the year of high highs, really, really deep lows, of transformation, of things feeling beyond your control and my control. There were really extraordinary highs, but there were also a lot of lows, and lows that were so beyond anything we could personally influence, almost like there was so many things recalibrating on an energetic field that is not inside of our purview. And what I know is that everything that unfolded for me, everything that's unfolded for the people that I've talked to about this, there's something much bigger that we're being recalibrated into. But I wanted to talk about it here because there's a lot of people starting to share their stories, people maybe presenting one image on social and then behind the scenes there's something else going on. And one of the things that I learned, 15, 16 years ago was how important it is to close those gaps, the transparency. And, we don't have to talk about our problems and our pain when we're in the wound stage, but I do believe that sharing, the less than perfect, the integration of what's happening, maybe the confusing, the messy, starts to make people feel less isolated and alone, and maybe as if there's something wrong with them because they're seeing this highly curated version of people's lives on social media and through their content. Well, I'm going to share a little bit about 2025, my year-end wrap. I want to share some highs, but I'm also going to share some things that I talked a little bit about this year, but this episode is going to be how it really personally was playing out for me. Now, I am somebody who has been in business since the year 2000. I am no stranger to ups and downs, to industry shifts, and this year was probably one of the most confusing. So let me take you to the beginning of 2025 for a minute. And I entered this year feeling a lot of energetic discord. I noticed very quickly that there was a lot of upheaval. I could see what was happening and unfolding with the political environment here in the US. And I had several friends who are way smarter and way more tuned into what's happening on the energetic field and in astrology and all of that. And they kept saying, yep, this is a year of upheaval. This is a year where anything that's not really aligned is meant to fall away. And, in the logical mind, we can see that and hear that. But then when you see it start to unfold, it takes on a whole new form, right? And I knew going into this year that I was holding on, I was clasping some things that I absolutely loved about my business. And I knew that energetically some things needed to change. I could feel that there were some things that were out of the purest, most powerful alignment for me, but I didn't know what needed to change yet. And this is where I believe fully that oftentimes we hold on to our sacred cows, so to speak, where we have spent thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars and hours building something. And it's no longer congruent with where the industry needs to go, with where your clients want to go, where with maybe even where you are meant to go. But yet we hold on to it because the idea of changing it again feels so daunting and overwhelming. And I will own I was there with some of my programs this year as we entered the year. But like the manifester and the person who craves known quantities, I kept pushing. I kept saying, let's make this better. Let's try this. And I kept trying to put new icing on a cake that was stale. And I will own that now because in retrospect, looking back and doing some market research and talking to a lot of my clients, it wasn't that my program wasn't working. It wasn't that it didn't produce great results, but there was something that was energetically out of sync with where things needed to go. And I didn't have the clarity yet. And then I started to watch so many of my clients and my friends and my business peers, watch them unravel. I could start to see the conversations shifting in our personal spaces, in the events we were attending, in our one-on-one time. And it wasn't for everybody that things stopped working, but they stopped feeling exciting. It started to feel heavy instead of energetically expansive. And if you're not familiar with that term, I like to think of something like when something is really aligned, it's almost like you can't stop it from expanding because it has an intrinsically expansive energy all on its own. It's almost like you can barely like put it out and people are like, oh my God, how do I do it? So watching all of the shifts that were not just happening in the buying behavior in my industry and putting programs out that were selling, but not the way I was used to, not the way I was hoping for. And then watching and hearing about the shifts that were happening for my peers and my clients. And I started to lean in and study, really look at what's going on, where's the trends, where's the patterns, and to really pay attention to what's wanting to emerge. Because what used to work, what used to perform well, even over the last couple of years, wasn't working as well as I needed it to if I was going to continue to put energy into it. So how people booked on podcasts was changing. And we had just introduced the ability to pitch clients. And, we were getting some good traction, but not enough to feel really solid about the strategy. We were watching that the authority positioning strategies that I teach weren't quite as effective as they had been before. The strategic partnering that I was doing, my peers were doing, we were all like, we love collaboration, but stuff's shifting. It's not really working the same way. So I was paying attention. Now, let me just layer in that this was a year that had some personal, really low points. My mother-in-law, who I was very, very close to, passed away early this year. And, I found myself holding an interesting balance of energies of wanting to, hold space for my clients, hold space for my husband, hold space for what was emerging and my own grief and navigating all of that. And things just got really, really heavy. And I started to have a different conversation with the people that I'm close to. And one of the things that emerged was this idea of the snake energy, of the burning off of what was coming through, and this awareness that things that were built in what we might call the old paradigm approaches could not sustain life force as we're emerging into this new paradigm. So one of the things that, whether you believe in this or not, there is an energetic shift that's occurring on the planet. We had what's called the completion of a 9-year, a ninth year. I don't even understand all of it, but this is what's been told to me. And it makes perfect sense. Like in the completion, there's a lot of things that close doors that cannot sustain its life force when it goes to the new year, the new 9-year. And we also had what's called in Chinese astrology, the year of the snake, which is a lot about shedding the old, of it, the die off, of closing chapters, closing energies, and all of this in preparation for what's emerging in 2026. Now, there are layers and layers and layers and layers of what's going on. But what I know is anything that is not 100% congruent and lighting you up and energetically expansive and sustainable beyond this year was closing. Like people I know who have massively, wildly successful businesses are closing, are recalibrating, are not able to sustain what worked and move it into the new year. And things like the old paradigm marketing approaches of build your list with freebies is like dying a quick death. I had a mastermind with some of my top partners earlier this month. And what was soundingly powerful about that conversation for all of us was the collective conversation about freebies no longer feeling aligned for our businesses. And the shift from giving people content to consume to giving them experiences to actually inviting people into some kind of a financial transaction so that they're more committed and more invested in working through the process to get to an outcome. It was really across the board one of the most powerful conversations because we started to collectively recognize how each and every one of us was on our own shifting our relationship with free content. And you'll see that as we move into 2026 in my own business. But there was something even deeper, knowing that old paradigm stuff can't work, anything that was built on an old model, that the frequency doesn't match where we're going in the new year. Totally get that. Recognizing that there were some things that were off, didn't quite know what to do about it, didn't quite have the clarity. And I started to get into the mud. You know, that mucky feeling of like, okay, I know it's supposed to change, but I don't know what I wanted to change to. So, I just keep things moving forward while I create some space to change. And I had a very successful event in the spring, Visibility Velocity. If you've been around for a while, you probably remember that. We will have it again in 2026 because it was wildly successful. I had another successful event online called the Collaboration Currency Challenge. Again, we had over 500 people register. People loved the content, but the action level didn't match the superior experience they were having with the content. And it got me really curious to go deeper. And I discovered something profound. So I use a tool called human design. I have a couple of friends that are really into it, who oftentimes will have conversations about it and share what we're learning. And you may have heard the episode a couple of weeks ago with my friend Samantha Riley. We talked a lot about my own experience with the tools that she uses in human design. And I'll link that up in the show notes to make sure that you can listen to it if you haven't already. And here's what I discovered. I knew this, but I hadn't embodied it yet. And that is I was operating my business from an old frequency. I was operating with a nervous system that was still dysregulated for where I'm going. And so when you have an energetic incongruence between the version of your business that you are operating and the version of you that you need to be to have the business that you desire, it will show up with failure, with low results, with energetic disappointment, with expectations not being met. And it's almost as if your frequency cannot attract what you need because it absolutely is mismatched. And so what that was translating to was lower enrollments in my group than I wanted, scrambling to adjust elements in my program from a logical place of, hey, I know what should be different, fixing it and going, wow, it's still not changing the results, over and over. And even I caught myself saying yes to opportunities that deep down inside, I knew were not really where I should be investing time and energy, but this FOMO energy was kicking in. I'm like, who is this person? And what I discovered were two really, really powerful things. One, my identity as a business leader was not integrated to the version of me that needed to be there to have the business, the impact, the clarity, the success that I knew was possible. But I was literally holding myself back because I was still integrating into this identity of a version of me that had failure, that had a lot of incompletes, that had disappointment, and that frequency was not going to be able to deliver a new outcome. So I got really, really clear very quickly, it's time for an identity upgrade. Because every time I've ever had massive up-leveling in my business, I had to create the identity of Melanie before the business could match. And I've done it over and over and over again, but I hadn't done it lately. As a matter of fact, if I'm being completely transparent, I was still carrying around a suitcase full of regret, of disappointment, of, some self-flagellation where I was beating myself up for mistakes I'd made decades ago. And I needed to clean that up, but I also needed to integrate who's Melanie when she is the unignorable expert. And that was step one. Step two was I had to revisit my human design. Now, if you're a human design follower, if you don't know what human design is, I will link up an episode that talks about human design, because human design is a tool that's available to all of us. All you have to do is know your birth date and time and location. But when you understand your human design, it acts like a bit of a blueprint and a guidance system that helps you be the most aligned, not from a logical place, but from an energetic place. And here's what's so interesting, my friend. I was operating out of logic. The frequency I was operating out of, there was maybe like some lingering scarcity, some holding on to things that were no longer where I was supposed to be. And I probably never was supposed to be, but I fell into some traps, a decade ago, right? I got into this tractor beam of this is what we do in the online business world. And by revisiting my human design and doing a couple sessions to have somebody hold space for me, to get me out of my logic brain and literally to look at what the data was saying about who I am at my most organically natural, powerful self, the light bulb went off. I was like, oh my goodness. I have contorted myself into playing it safe in such a clever, sneaky way that gives me the illusion that I am moving things on a big way. But what I've done is I've let this frequency of the old version of Melanie dictate what I was saying yes to, what I believed I was capable of. And I was not lining up my work to do the thing that I was born to do, which is collaborate. I collaborate, but I wasn't really owning my most natural talent of leading community. And then when I looked at the information from my human design, and I had this person holding space for me, and I dug deep into it, all of a sudden, it all made sense. Why the old wasn't working the way it could have, and what had to shift. Because when you are out of congruence with your most authentic and energetically congruent self, anything you build from that space doesn't have enough power to grow exponentially. Ultimately, what I regained clarity on, because I actually started my business this way, was that I am here to lead. I am here to work with leaders, and I am here to lead communities. And that is how I came to birthing the Rising Tide Collective. This is something that I have had a seed of clarity on for 3 years. I've wanted to do this for 3 years. But I would let myself get busy. I would get distracted. I'd get overcommitted. I'd get some other bright, shiny idea, and I would just put this on the side. And all of a sudden, everything started to come together and get absolutely clear. My brand that is emerging around becoming unignorable, the book, the private podcast that I've launched, and the Rising Tide Collective, it all calibrated in. And here's the really cool thing. When you say yes to the energetic congruence of what is super aligned and where you're meant to be, it gets easy. I've heard people talk about this, and I have had things that were really easy in the early days, but I wasn't the version of me that I am today. And being the version I am of me today, and I started to do the identity work and recalibrate my identity for this version of me that I know I'm being called to be, all of a sudden, instead of resisting it and going, yeah, I don't know, am I ready? Am I capable? Would anybody want that? I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I meant to do. Because the right vision without the calibrated identity, the integration of who you're meant to be, it cannot sustain itself. You cannot have clarity and a full body yes to something that your identity doesn't match. So that's why these two pieces have to come together. You have to have the identity. You have to be energetically in the version of you that can have the capacity, that can have the clarity, that can have the confidence for it, even if you don't have it all yet. But just the awareness of like, yes, this is mine. I'm saying yes to this. And you have to be saying yes and building the thing that is energetic congruent with your human design, or whatever version of that works for you. So what I am saying yes to for 2026, more experiences with experts and leaders who are ready to be unignorable. I love everyone who has a mission on this planet, but I know I am uniquely qualified and capable of serving the people who are ready to be unignorable, even if that means facing some of their fears and the barriers that have been in the way, right? I know that I am here to build a powerful community of experts and leaders who are co-creating visibility and opportunities on a whole nother caliber. This is a whole nother very intentional community in the Rising Tide Collective. And I also know that what's emerging is a space for the leaders who they know it's time to be visible, to be unignorable, to own the conversation in their space unapologetically, and to not let the excuses, the fears, the limitations make decisions for them anymore. So I'm moving from coaching. So that little voice that kept popping into my head earlier this year, and I even pronounced this in a community I'm in, and I said, I think I might be leaving coaching. And everybody was like, what? You've been coaching for 25 years. You would leave? And I was like, I don't know. There's just like something shifting, and I don't know what it is yet. Well, it's not that I don't coach anymore, because I do. But that's not the fullest expression of my gifts. That's not the fullest impact of my leadership. I'm here to lead community. I'm here to lead and to integrate and to hold space for other leaders and experts who are ready to make big transformation happen. And they know that together, that will collectively compound and multiply. So as we close the door on this very transformational year, I want to acknowledge that there were some beautiful highs. There were some really extraordinary relationships that came to fruition, but there was also a lot of learnings and integrations and messiness and uncertainty. And maybe you still have that. I mean, I still have uncertainty as well. Like, I don't know how all this is going, But here's what I do know is when we decide to create the identity of a leader and we decide to integrate the most resourceful, capable version of us, and we release the versions of us that have been stuck in an old narrative or a story that hold us back, what I know is everything we need is being revealed to us. And the more we associate into that identity of the version of us we need to be, and the more we surround ourselves with people that are playing at that level, and we enter the rooms where the conversation's different, and the energy is different, and the leadership is different, and the collaborative visibility is more powerful, what I know is that that's the recipe to move through uncertainty with assuredness that every step of the way you're going to be taken care of in some way, shape, or form. So if 2025 stretched you, confused you, challenged you, recalibrated you, has left you maybe confused, or is creating a new invitation for you to shed what no longer serves you, just know you are not alone. Know that the quality of the support and resources you have are the gateway to moving into something more supportive, more expansive, and more aligned. I highly recommend that if you don't know your human design and you feel at all intrigued by it, find out what your human design is. And if you are feeling that call to rise with other leaders and be part of a collective that's transforming your business and up-leveling you and up-leveling the kinds of visibility opportunities that are available to you, I highly recommend you apply for the Rising Tide Collective. I will link it up in the show notes for you. I'm going to go a little bit deeper into the identity piece in one of the next episodes. But for now, I'd love to hear, what's your year in review? What's the highs? What were the lows? And what are you integrating so that you can step into 2026 with more power and purpose? Thanks for tuning in today, Amplifier. We're going to keep this conversation going, and I want to hear from you how you're going to amplify your authority and make a greater impact. Before you go, please take a minute to give our show and our guests some love over on your favorite podcasting platform. Subscribe, rate, and review. Leave your full name, and I'll spotlight you and your authority on social media.